we are producing a book which has around 10 chapters. And this book is going to be launched on the International Women's Day. And we're also going to have a documentary that will also be around the same day. And once we are through with it, we'll be able to share it with you. Yeah. And we'll also invite you for the launch.
Good.
Because I believe you are still committed to the cause for women. So Waso and I will be interviewing you on certain issues, affirmative action, issues to do with the constitution making, the issues to do with the women's movement, and especially the in terms of looking at how the women movement has grown from pre-independence and throughout, because I believe you've participated all through. So Sharon will be taking the notes as Kihima is doing the video and the photographs.
Okay.
Yes. So maybe to start us off, you can tell us about a small background about you, so that and also tell us about what inspires you to be able to fight vigorously for the rights of the Kenyan woman. Yes.
Well, my name is Phoebe Asiyo. I was born at Gendia, not far from Lake Victoria. Gendia was a missionary setup where my father was a pastor of the Seventh Day Adventist church. And that's where I grew up. In those days, many women were dying in the process of giving life, and many children were dying. And I saw quite a number of children die at home, and also in the hospital where I sometimes went to help as a young girl. I went to school at Gendia and later on went to Kamagambo, and then went for a teacher training course in Embu. Came back and did some teaching, and then as the emergency broke out, I joined the Nairobi City Council as a social worker. And my main duty was to collect children whose parents had been either killed or detained, or those who went to the forest. I still remember the Lari massacre very vividly, where many parents were killed and children were left alone in the villages around Limuru area. We went around picking them up and bringing them into Nairobi. And the only home that was available to take care of these orphans was Edelville Children's Home in Dunham, which was run by the Catholic nuns. But even that was overflowing at that time with all these children. So we found some foster parents. I fostered quite a few of those children where there were no shelter for them. And from there I could see the injustices, the sort of violence that were meted by the British soldiers, on the innocent men and women in Nairobi and outside Nairobi. And that sort of pricked in me the need for social justice. And I guess it is from there that I started feeling strongly about fairness, human rights, and even the place of women in our society. So yes, that was the beginning.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about the women's movement, the development of the women's movement and your involvement.
In 1952, I'd just come out of Embu and I was a teacher in Nairobi. So the British women, wives of district commissioners and settlers, started Maendeleo Ya Wanawake. I think initially they wanted information from the African women and nothing more. So they involved African women, and I joined. So in 1954, when Mrs. Beecher, who was the wife of the Bishop of East Africa, and also from the Leakey family, showed some interest in the development of the African women and involvement in Maendeleo, I joined. I joined, and we worked together with several other women who came from various parts of Kenya, but it ended at that. There was no full involvement in the decisions that were made by Maendeleo Ya Wanawake, and this rather disturbed us. At some stage, we even sought the help of Tom Mboya to start a rival women's organization, but our application was turned down. In fact, I remember the name we applied for the registration of usawa ya wanawake katika Kenya, na walikataa. They refused us registration. So we went back to Maendeleo and started scheming how to get into the real executive committee decision making of Maendeleo Ya Wanawake. And Mrs. Beecher accepted us, but the rest of the white settlers, the wives, refused. They could not entertain our being, sitting together and discussing the issues that the women of Kenya were dealing with at that time. So I remember leading a protest march from the Secretariat building, which is now called Yogo House, where the meeting was held, through Mudhurwa, Makongeni. Then we were arrested. When we reached Makaluni, we were arrested and taken to Mudhurwa police station and kept there for a while. But there was a gentleman called Musa Malemba, who was quite close to the British then. So we sent word, and he came, talked to the police, and we were released. But then that was the beginning of our getting fully now involved in Maendeleo Ya Wanawake. The British women were shy and allowed us space to bring in our own agenda and ideas. And it worked well for us. We participated in changing the agenda, because it was very narrow at that time. We brought in ideas like for economic empowerment of women. Even at that time, agriculture was key, because women were the farmers, and they needed to have information about better methods of farming and so on. And then we started talking politics. Jomo Kenyatta was in detention, and at that time many men were going to see him in detention and discussing the future of our nation with him, and no women went. But we tried and were able to send one woman to Lancaster House, Priscilla Bwao, who was nominated member of parliament. We raised some money, but also got some help from men like Mboya, and we sent Priscilla Bwao to represent us at the Lancaster House. And she came back with a lot of good information about the discussions at Lancaster House. And we began to feel like we were getting there, because now in Britain there was a woman's voice, and we gave Priscilla a lot of information on what, although there were KANU, there were only two political parties. There was KANU and KANU. I was in KANU, and there were others. Priscilla was in KANU. But it was the women, the issues of women, that concerned us most. So we converged at that stage, KANU and KANU, and drafted an agenda for Lancaster House meetings. Later on, we asked the Chief Native Commissioner, his name was Atkins, to allow us to also go and meet with Kenyatta in detention, to discuss with Kenyatta the role that women would play it was obvious he was going to be the president of this nation. And we wanted ahead of time for us to know, for him to know our concerns, and we wanted to convince him to give space to women in leadership, also in governance. And so after a while, we saw the governor, Patrick Renison. And I remember him telling us, do you have a woman who can drive? Because we were asking for a plane, but they were giving light plane to women. They told us, no, we can only give you a Land Rover to go to Lodwar. Then he said, do you have a woman driver? He said, but we don't mind a man driving us to Lodwar. But then somebody came with the name of Josephine Mudhoni, who had a license at that time. She was the only woman who could drive then. And he said, no, you don't have a woman. But we brought Josephine to the meeting with the Chief Native Commissioner. And I remember him laughing and saying, okay, then we'll give you a man. So he gave us a man to take us to Lodwar to meet with Kenyatta. But we did things differently. Us, we bought a lot of green vegetables, a lot of flowers, a lot of fruits. So we left at about 3 o'clock in the morning. We got there late in the evening, and Mzee came and opened the gate for us. And when he saw the women come out with their flowers and their green vegetables, and with the fruits, he clapped and laughed really loudly. He ushered into the house. I remember Ida Mbotela, a real, convicted Christian Anglican. She said a very powerful prayer, and then we sat down and we introduced ourselves. And then I looked at this man, and I was lost for words. I didn't even know where to begin after we introduced ourselves. But eventually we talked. And Kenyatta listened, and he empathized. He knew the place of women, not only in Kenya but Africa, and he was very concerned, especially about the heavy load that women were carrying, the fact that so many women were dying in childbirth, and that there was no hygiene. The conditions for the African people, especially for women and children, was really bad at that time, and he knew, and he made a promise that his government will take care of our concerns. We asked him for 50-50 representation in parliament and local authorities. And he looked at us and said, fine, but do you have women who are well educated as men to occupy these positions? Unfortunately, we carried no documents with us to even show anything. But he understood. And he said, but we've got men who've gone to India for further education, to South Africa, to Britain. What women do you have that can, occupy seats in my government? And we said, but we are here, Mzee, and we can. So when he came out, he tried. He set up the Commission of Marriage and Divorce, and also the inheritance, because the laws then were pretty bad for the African women here. They made very good recommendations. Those commissions, unfortunately, Parliament refused to accept our recommendations of the commission. They did not enact the laws that had been proposed by the two commissions. But Tanzania took it all and enacted the same laws that were meant for this country. And so that is where the fight for women's space truly started, because we saw that our leaders were truly not convinced that we needed to be where they were in terms of formulating policies for our nation. Many times they said, but you belong to the kitchen. This is the one word I've heard over the years. You belong to the kitchen. What makes you feel that you want to come and join the men when the men are doing such superb work, taking care of you people and providing legislation and laws that will protect you, the women, the children, and the men? And what is your problem? Why do you really want to upset the status quo? And it's been a very long walk. And as I look back now, I'm somehow very disappointed, Because you see, the new constitution gave us a lot of gain. We made a lot of gains as women. And they are being negated one by one. They are not more than 2/3 issue. It was a foregone issue. It was decided by the Kenyan people, not by women. The men and women sitting at the bomas of Kenya, drafting the new constitution, agreed that there will be not more than 2/3 of any gender in governance as well as legislature. But somehow it has not worked in the legislature. It has not worked in the Senate. It has not worked in Parliament. It has not even worked in the county government. In government, they have tried to respect the constitution. Although now we have one woman short in cabinet secretaries, at least we have strong women in the parastatals and also in the various ministries and departments. But the political leaders have not really respected the new constitution, and that bothers me, because I don't know what the future holds now for our women who've done so very well for this country, worked so hard, to feed our families, to educate the children, and to run communities, even government departments, that even at this age, the men, mainly the men in our legislature, will not allow these gains to be realized by the women of Kenya. So that's a very big disappointment for me.
That is quite great. Yeah.
In the market, she's in the shamba. She spent maybe only 1 hour in the kitchen. So that kitchen is a very British thing. Yes, white women spend a lot of time in the kitchen because, one, they have no workers, and then they don't do the type of work that we women, we African women do here. It was very different. We have done very well. If I take you back to where I was then, one, there was a study done by the YWCA when it was first created in Kenya, and they did a study in the Nairobi industrial area and discovered that there were no toilets for women. That is where we've come from. It's like they were not supposed to even be in those industries, in those factories, yet they were there in numbers, but no provision was made for them, even restrooms for them. So that tells you where we come from. Like, we did not exist. We did not even need toilets in factories where the women worked. It was after that study was blown up by the media that the factories started making provisions now for women to have toilets in even in government offices. There were room. There were, yes, space for ladies, but no space for ladies. And you really had to exert yourself in order for you to get what you wanted. So some of us there decided to be very hard and to exert ourselves, because we knew what we needed. We knew that we had these rights. They were basic human rights, and we were not aliens. We were Kenyans, although of different gender. But our contribution to this nation was just as good as the contribution that our men made to this country. So there was no way we were going to sit back and accept these notions of our being in the kitchen, which was not true. Again, I became a senior prisons officer, and at one time, the junior men wouldn't salute me. As a senior officer, when you meet a junior person, they salute. They didn't. One told Mama, I can't raise my hands to salute a woman. I don't know what to do. I said, you will raise your hands. Because if those hands can go up for a man, they can as well also go up for a woman. It was very hard. But eventually they got used to also saluting for senior women officers. And eventually now, of course, there are many women in that particular department in the prisons who are very senior, men who are occupying similar positions, almost the same position as the men. So we've come a long way, but I think the women have won this war.
How did it change? If you are not saluting, now to saluting, what action was taken?
You know, saluting is like a respectful way of saying jambo. And of course you reciprocate as a senior person. But men found it very hard. And sometimes I didn't, if I saw them coming, I would change course so that I don't have to take them through the, the idea of saluting for a woman. That was very difficult in the prison. But also, there were other issues in the prisons department that really bothered me as a woman. There was this occasion when I was preparing a woman who was going to hang. The son came to visit her. And then she said in her vernacular that, you know, son, I'm dying in your place. So please take care of the family. And when the son left, I asked her why. She told the son she was dying. And she told me, imekwisha, hakuna kitu ya kusema. And she smiled and I said, no, tell me. Why did you tell your son that you are dying in his place? After persuading her for a very long, even praying with her, she said, look, my son killed his father. But he's the only child, the only son I have. And I'm past childbearing age. And then I said, what happened? She said, oh, he used an axe to kill his father. I told him to change his clothes, wash, and I sent him to my sister. And I carried that axe, went to the police station, and surrendered having killed my husband. And then she was charged. She pleaded guilty. And this was the time she was being prepared to hang. And I knew there was no time because the hangman wanted to come and measure the neck as they always do. Fortunately, Jomo Kenyatta was the president, and I knew Margaret Kenyatta, and also knew a British guy who was in charge of the Anglican church. So I called Margaret, I called this guy. Eventually, it was a long story, but eventually we were able to get to Mzee. And I told him the story. So he called the AG. We had a Solicitor General also at that time. And they decided that she would not hang. But you know, I thought that if this woman, if I had not been here, if I had not listened, she would have just hung and nothing would have happened. So I wondered whether there are other women who might have just hung and nobody knew anything about them. And I went through every single file. And there were two who had not actually killed their husbands. But they were hanging and they were quite happy that they were saving their children. And I'm so happy that the hanging thing is gone, that Kenya no longer hang. Because you know, you reduce yourself to the position of a killer by also killing. And it does not deter anybody who's killed, because when you kill them, you are not deterring them from anything. Yes, of course, you are deterring those who are around, but it's not the best thing to do. And as a Christian, I was not happy about this killing. Thou shalt not kill. I mean, yes, they have killed, but then there are other punishments, like restitution, for example. Or life sentences and things like that. And I'm glad that the Kenyan government has reached that stage where they no longer hang even the most notorious of our people. So that was my experience in prisons. They have done so well now, you cannot believe what is going on in our prisons in this country. In fact, there are certain programs that the prison department are undertaking that are not found even in some of the most developed countries. Like now, you know, they have this program where women are taught to be lawyers, those long-term sentences women, and they're able to actually, represent women in court. The last time I visited the women's prison in Langata, they had 1-2 cases of women who had been charged with murder. So things have really improved now in that department.
That is great.
And you gone through any training before you are employed as a prison warder, as a prison officer?
Yes, there were very senior training programs. You went through the penal code system, programs for young offenders, for women, because they're really different, and also generally programs of rehabilitation of offenders. But there are certain issues that happened in those days that were really horrifying. Like, for example, I went to a court just to listen to one of the ladies who was taken to court, and she looked very she looked like she had committed that offense, and she was turning her clothes, and apparently she had a monthly period, and the police custody was not providing any sanitary towels for women in those days. So she just looked guilty and was found guilty and was sent. And she was just a petty offender because she was covered with blood, and she didn't want to even look at the magistrate. So the magistrate said, this one is a criminal. So when I raised this issue at a meeting of senior prison and police officers at one time, but I mistakenly said we needed sanitary towels. One man told me, what? You want women to be given towels and not men? And these are offenders. I said, then I had to explain now that it was not towels as such, it was a privilege.
Yeah.
But after my explanation, they understood. And then now the police started giving women sanitary towels, those who are on remand, and also in the prison. So all these very basic rights that women did not enjoy, both outside and inside prisons, even in the police custody, that we found out and made some policies about.
So which came first?
Officer did. That's when I became a prison officer. And it was mainly rehabilitation of women offenders. And most of the women offenders were, committed crimes of need, truly, not crimes of... not real criminals as such, like those who are brewing changa without licenses, selling vegetables in the cities without licenses, or yes, there were others who had killed, and in most cases they had either killed their husbands or their co-wives, and that is something that we could understand from that aspect. But eventually, when I finished with the prisons department, Tom Mboya was assassinated in 1969, and Humphrey Slade, who was Speaker of the Assembly, asked me if I could take over from Pamela Mboya in the Child Welfare Society, because she could no longer do that work. She was very hurt and could not carry herself like she did before anymore. So I did. I went to Child Welfare Society of Kenya and dealt with children in the children's homes and adoption of children. And at that time, we even asked the president if he could set up a commission to make the child adoption a little more elastic, because they was too stringent then. And even the best of parents who applied to adopt children sometimes were not allowed to do so because of the laws that existed then. They were from the British, and Kenya had not done much to. So when Kenyatta set up this commission on child adoption, I was appointed as one of the commissioners, and we did some very good work. The parliament adopted our recommendations and made them into law, and therefore that adoption that was so hard became more elastic, and therefore more people, childless couples, could now have access to adopt orphans. I know that recently they also worked on child adoption laws, and they made it even better now in Kenya. But those are some of the issues that we dealt with from the time of independence until recently.
Child adoption laws. Sorry for that.
You want me to expand on it? Or? No, we've ended there.
Okay, I think we ended there.
Okay.
But before we get back to that, you mentioned the member of parliament.
Yes, nominated by the parliament, by the government those days.
So before you took over the chairmanship of Maendeleo Ya Wanawake, who was the chair?
It was Mrs. Beecher, the wife of the Bishop of East Africa Anglican Church.
A white or a black person?
Oh, she was white. They were all white. There were no black people. Mrs. Beecher was a Leki family, and she married Reverend Beecher, who was the bishop, Anglican Bishop of East Africa.
Anglican bishop.
So let's talk about politics, Mheshimiwa. After being a state officer in the prisons and the child welfare and a teacher, so how did it start in the politics and joining active politics? And
I think,
how was it? Yeah.
after all the experiences I had had in social service as a teacher, as a prison officer, and many other things that I did, I felt like I needed to be in a place where I could influence policy change for this country. I knew then that perhaps I didn't stand a chance of being nominated. And so I started looking for a constituency. And the only obvious one was this one, where I was born and raised. But my problem was this. There was only one party, KANU, in those days. And the national chairman of that party was the member of parliament for this same constituency. So I did not see how, in the first place, I would be nominated by KANU to stand, and whether KANU would accept me. And it was not easy. So when I first indicated I would contest the seat here, many people just laughed. But you see, I had done a lot of work in this constituency, and I got to know the area very well. I got to know the real felt needs of the people in this area. And because I was born here and also married the same constituency, I had many friends and relatives. Because my mother was also born here. My father, although came from Nyakach, was a pastor here for many years. And my grandmother was a very well-known woman fighter. She actually fought in the tribal wars. So I piggybacked on my grandmother's fame, and my father as a pastor, and my mother's family, when the first Europeans came, they went to my mother's home and stayed there for a while before they set up their own mission. So I was able to use these connections to appeal to the people. But even more so, when Oginga Odinga left the Luo Union East Africa, he was the president of Luo Union East Africa, and joined politics. My father was then elected by the East African delegates to take over from Odinga. And so that gave me an upper hand, really, in the politics of this area. But it was not easy because KANU was in full control, and the chairman of KANU was also the member of parliament for this area, but also was the chairman of the constituency KANU and the district KANU branch, as well as the national. And then he also became chair of the notorious KANU disciplinary committee. So it was very hard. And of KANU, yeah.
Okiki.
Amayo. David Okiki Amayo. But what was beautiful about these arrangements was David Okiki Amayo was, both of us were brought up in the mission setup. So we knew each other very well. He knew me well, he knew my parents, my brothers and sisters, and I did the same. So even as we fought for this seat, there was that little window that helped us to go back to our origins, to where we came from, and that helped a lot. But it was a very violent campaign. Many people were hurt. I was also hurt. Many of my supporters were hurt, but the chiefs were perhaps the worst in the whole scenario, because they loomed large. Chiefs were the eyes of government everywhere, and they could even arrest a minister. They had those powers. So they gave me a very hard time. And then at one time when President Moi came to Homa Bay, he asked the people to vote for Mr. Mayo because he was a true Nyayo follower. And the people just told him in open that, now you can nominate him, but we elect our own. That didn't go down well with many of them, and quite a few people were bundled, put in a police lorry, harassed a little, and then let to go free. But that even hardened the people here even more. So I was elected in 1979. But there was a petition soon after that. And 8 months later, I was checked out of Parliament. But they did not disqualify me from contesting the seat again. So I contested the seat a second time within that 1 year, and was elected in by a bigger margin. So that, I think, now cemented my leadership and convinced the people that whatever Mr. Mayo was able to do, I could even do it better in terms of development and the areas of education, of food security, women's health, as well as women, as children. That brought me very close to the people. So they kept electing me until the Mlolongo, notorious Mlolongo, yes, where I remember the chief, where my mother's home is, actually pushed my mother from lining for me behind my picture to that of Mr. Mayo. A few days later, she got a stroke, I think, because of this. And that made things very hard for me, because I didn't want my mother to be hurt because of this politics. But they chucked me out of Parliament. I saw chiefs, like, for example, there were 40 people in the line. They just added 0 to make it 400. So you couldn't win. It was very hard to even win. So then they chucked me out, and that was okay. It gave me time to really now work in this area. I worked with women, I worked with children, I worked with teachers, I worked with farmers, everybody, fishermen. And so when the elections came next time, I was now elected without any problem. And there was no petition. Because...
That's 1992?
Yes, 92. After 88, this notorious. Yeah. So that has been my political history. It's been very rewarding, but also very challenging in terms of patriarchy. Even to date, men still feel strongly about their leadership positions, not only in politics, but even in the church, in the community. But at least for this area, it's different. The people got to know me for who I was and really supported me. They worked with me very, very closely. And we were able to to win 4 times. Then I retired. I did not want to continue because it was not easy. Although we got our multi-party system, the mindsets were still the same. The chiefs were still the same, and it took a long time for people to change their thinking about political leadership. But today, I must say, it's different. Our people have accepted women's leadership here at the grassroots level, and women are doing a lot more in certain areas, certain fields, more than the men. And I, as I talk with people in this village and elsewhere, as I meet them in churches, funerals, and other gatherings, they are very clear about women's leadership now. And except for the top, down here, women are accepted as leaders. And they are doing very good work in their role as leaders in the community, in the church, in the schools, and so on. My worry is at the national level, where patriarchy is still a very big problem, and where women do not seem to be winning the wars that we have fought and won in the past. I do not know what the future holds for the women of Kenya, but I believe they might just have to go back to the drawing board now, especially after the defeat of the not more than 2/3 the other day in Parliament. Yes, there is a crisis, constitutional crisis, because we have not met the threshold, and the women just have to gear up now. Men of goodwill and the women of Kenya must come together now and implement the constitutional provisions for both men and women. Because you see, we have a nation, and although today we are 42 tribal nations, I believe the engagement of women in leadership will perhaps get Kenyans to start thinking about nationhood. But keeping women out of our political arrangement and leadership is not going to help this country. It can only hurt us more. And I hope that men and women of goodwill will make sure that the women and men are engaged in policy making of our nation, without exception, that we need both men and women. And it's a pity that it has not worked for us. But maybe we need different approaches, different from what we've done in the past, to get men to accept women as leaders and to work with them as such.
That is quite interesting. So how was it in 1979 and these other times? Women are very few in Parliament. You are some of the pioneers. How was it like to be among the few women that are in Parliament dominated by men? Yeah, your experiences.
In Parliament, men gave us a lot of respect in those days. I remember anytime I went to the chamber, the men would sort of give me room to go first and to even help wherever whether they are still doing the same like they did in those days. But we worked very well together, men and women, in Parliament. And even though, like when I tabled the Affirmative Action motion in the House, many women leaders worked with me in the preparation of the motion, especially Professor Kubanjiko Kabira. And on that day when I was to present the motion, We had invited women from the provinces to come and give us the support. But little did we know that the parliament would not let the women come into the galleries to listen to the and like Martin Shikuku said, oh, if they bring these women into the galleries to persuade us and to try to convince us that this is the right thing, the women must know that they are not going to get it. And he was very defiant. And I remember one of them saying, oh, you woman, you want these women to grow horns. And I said, yes, horns of peace and development, that's a bad idea. But it didn't work. My motion was very badly defeated. And I remember Sunkuli, Honorable Sunkuli, telling me that this is a very dangerous motion, that it will do a lot of harm to the relationship of men and women, that women might now start thinking that they were getting nearer to sharing the national cake and also the decision-making processes. Even the Vice President was very hard on me. And now that I read the Hansard, I'm just wondering how I was able to go through that. It was very hard. They were very, very hard on me. Somebody even suggested that I should be taken back home and given reorientation because I was African and there was no way I could, try to even change and upset the laws of the land and the relationships that men and women enjoy in their villages. They said it was very peaceful. Women have no problem. They want men to continue representing them. Why you bring all these issues now when women in the villages are very happy with us? They won't even elect another woman. What's your problem? It was very hard. Very, very hard. But eventually when Beth Mugo brought a affirmative action motion much later, the parliament accepted, except they did not implement it. Now they threw it back to the Constitution Review Commission to take it up and do something about it. They could have implemented it after they accepted, and they would have put all these arrangements in position, because Beth Mugo was very clear about what she wanted for the women of Kenya. But no, they accepted, but threw it to the newly formed Constitution Commission to deal with it. That just shows you that there's been no real acceptance of women's leadership and positioning in our political and governance systems. Okay. And we worked on it with Wanjiko and other ladies for over 6 months before I tabled it in the House. And women all over Kenya. In fact, we had many women come to Parliament on that day, but they refused them entry. Until a member of Parliament from Kamkunji actually said there were women who had been locked outside. Then they allowed the women to come in. And then I remember the acting speaker, the temporary speaker, really telling women to shut up. Oh. Yes, he really frightened women who were sitting in the gallery. And it was like he was telling us, look, you don't belong here.
Who was that?
The acting speaker on that day. He really thundered from that powerful. He said, I will throw you out, of this, of those galleries if you continue entering. And even, because at once it was wrong for women, but they booed somebody who made some very bad remarks. And then so the deputy speaker said, I'll throw you out of this. You could feel that hostility everywhere, in the galleries, in the August House itself, even when we went out for tea after the defeat of my motion. And the women could not believe that they had worked so very hard. And the same men that they had tried to talk to before were now turning against them and saying no to affirmative action. But some of the men were so embarrassed when they saw the women who had been working with them through this. They just walked out of Parliament and went away because they were embarrassed. They felt ashamed. They let us down when we had hoped that they would support us, they would talk well and support the motion. No, they didn't support us. There were a few men who supported us. Michuki was very good. He really gave us a lot of support. He gave very good examples. And Mukisa Kitui was excellent. But the others were not, they just said no. And they said no. And one said, I will not step back into this house if you bring all those women here. It was very hard.
How many women?
Gilu was already in there. That is 79. 79, I think we had like 9, 10 women in parliament. Against 200 or so.
Oh, that was 79.
1979. It is the beginning. In the beginning we were like 3 women. But eventually we went up to 9.
Vessel Court mentioned something that the husband mentioned during her death, that the men were all over. Because the men were, being the few women or only woman in parliament, and the men were all over, trying to want to date her. What was your experience?
I never had. I guess when I was older, maybe I was not attractive enough for anyone. They even talk about. But when you are serious in that house, the men take you for who you are. Yeah, and maybe they will joke, but they respect you, and will work with you and assist you. But in those days, now you have women chairs of various committees in parliament. In those days, you could only be chair of the messing committee, the catering committee, which I chaired for some time and eventually said no. I didn't want to cater, yeah.
With the laws that you're carrying through.
Yeah. Those have been the attitudes.
In fact, even the current parliament, I hope you have the card. How you participated at your role.
Are we on? Yeah, the role of women
in the constitution making.
In the beginning, it was very hard for women to be appointed in the commission that reviewed the new constitution for this country. Fortunately, Martha Karua was very forceful and helpful, and she chaired a committee that selected women, that interviewed and selected women to be appointed to the commission that made the new constitution. And in the beginning we had two commissions, one by the Ufungamano, the faith-based, and then the other one by parliament. Eventually we came into one under Professor Guy. And we worked very well. What amazed me was when we went to collect views from Kenyan people, the women articulated the issues very well. I know that the women's movements had prepared women to do this, but it is because of where they were coming from, where they were, the conditions under which they lived, that they really expressed the need for a constitution that would be friendly to women, to the infirm, to the disabled, and children. They did that even more than the professional men who gave us their views, and that was very impressive. And when we went to now sit and write the new constitution in the Bomas of Kenya, the women again did extremely well. They were in every committee, and before the meeting started, they sat together and agreed and strategized on the issues that concerned them most. This is why there were so many gains for women, because of the strategies that women had put in place and the hard work that they had done, both in their districts and also at Bomas. And remember, we made arrangements to have 3 people from every district and 1 was a woman. That was accepted, which was like the 1/3 we're talking about now. And these are strong women, and they held very strong views about future governance of our country and the place of women in those governance systems and also in the law-making organs of the country. The work was very strenuous, going around the whole country and listening to the views of Kenyans. But eventually we converged and Kenyans agreed on this masterpiece, on this document that is now the new constitution. We had problems in the beginning. There was the zero draft that was not accepted by the president. But eventually, when we came back together, those same ideas that were in the zero draft were brought into this new draft. And I think this new constitution is perhaps one of the best worldwide, because we consulted also very, very actively with other nations in Africa and outside Africa, and we got the very best for our country. My only disappointment is the fact that we are not implementing ideas that coming from the highest law of the land, the Constitution. We need to respect and implement the Constitution. It was the making of the new Constitution was not easy. Many times we broke and came back together and started all over again, and eventually it worked. And Kenyans, every Kenyan who got involved gave extremely worthy ideas for the welfare of this state, the welfare of this country. And I want to urge our leaders and parliamentarians to make sure that they respect the new constitution and that they implement every single aspect of it, because it's good for us all, for men, women, and for our nation.
Just on the constitution that was defeated in 2005, as compared to the one that now we passed in 2010. Are you aware of any maybe more gains in the WACO draft?
The WACO draft had more gains, but they were trashed, some of them. But we made do with whatever now the country accepted. I know that if there had been more women at that level, all those gains that were in the WACO draft would be reflected now in this new draft. But it's okay. Whatever we have here will keep us going for now, and hopefully Kenya will want to review this constitution again, and all those ideas that were left at that time can then be brought in. It's a continuous thing, and constitutions are not static. They keep changing all the time, and hopefully the younger women now will pick up from the WACO draft and make sure that the future amendments of the new constitution also embraces those ideas that were left there. So the League of Women Voters did some very good work by educating the women and making them aware of the need to vote in men and women. The Maendeleo Ya Wanawake was truly a welfare, socio-economic organization that dealt with the empowerment of women, their health, their nutrition status, and so on. Maendeleo only recently got involved in politics. In those days when Raila was being detained in and out, Maendeleo was not political at all. And it's a pity, because they had a voice, and they could have helped women such as Ida Odinga when the husband was being thrown in and out of detention in those days. But there is the Federation of Women Lawyers now. It's doing some very good work. The League of Women Voters doing very good work, and many other women's organizations that have not just looked at the human rights of our peoples, but also their economic and social well-being. perhaps you will remember the Mabati women.
Mm-hmm.
There was a time that the Kenya government promised that there will be water in every household by the year 2000.
Mm-hmm.
And of course it did not. Even today we don't have water in anywhere near our homes. But the women decided to build Mabati roofs to provide water, and of course also give better protection for the children. And they did this on their own. The men were not even there, although they enjoyed that clean water, which women were drawing from rivers very far from home. That was the work of the women of Kenya. And then there's all these now circles for women. They are doing very good work, even the table banking and so on. It's putting money in the hands of women. And a woman's money in a woman's hands goes to her household, for the husband, for the children, for everybody. Some of the men's money would perhaps end in a bar once in a while, but the woman's money really goes home, and that's where I think we need to laud the Kenyan woman for what she's done for our community, for our family, and also for the empowerment of women generally. The circles are doing very well here. I'm very proud with our member of parliament for this area. She's done extremely well, empowering the women financially. And the government also set up these two, the enterprise, the fund for women enterprises. That has also done very well. Women who did very small businesses are now doing good businesses. The contracts, the government supplies and contracts, it's a pity that they have rather bent on one side, and not all the women from all regions have benefited. But those women who have benefited have done very well. I think they've shown this country that whatever men can do, even in construction of roads or buildings, the women can also do better even.
So, did you have any role in the development of the later women movement?
Of the
women movement?
Yes, I did. In the 1960s, as I mentioned earlier, there was the African women's movement that was started somewhere in Guinea, and where Margaret Kenyatta was appointed coordinator for Eastern Africa. And I remember the first meeting that we held in Dar es Salaam, where Margaret chaired, and a lady from Guinea co-chaired with Margaret. And it was a real eye-opener. It was a political organization. Mm-hmm. And it really opened the eyes of the African woman. And they got to appreciate that for independence to be achieved, they needed to be involved. Of course, they had been involved before, but that after independence, they needed to work hand in hand with the men, and where possible, even assist those states, those countries that were still under the colonial rule. And they did. We did some very good work. It was after that the idea came back to individual African states, where now in Kenya, for example, Margaret Kenyatta was chair of what we called the Kenya Women Seminars, eventually East African Women Seminars. Edgar Gachukia was very, very strong in this. In fact, the bulk of the strategies that we used then were made on the veranda of Edgar Gachukia's home. That is how hard the women worked to look at the policies that the men were making for their countries, the young countries, and to have inputs in some of these policies. And they were tremendous. They were not small time. I think the women contributed a lot to even governance of the new countries through women's movement at that time. The mindset of some of our men and fear of the unknown. Men don't really know that women can make very good presidents and leaders And patriarchy has brought us this far. Accepting a woman as a leader is still very alien to some of our people. But we have some very fine men who see further than some of those in leadership positions, and who really want the women to participate alongside them in the running of our nation. It is difficult to pinpoint the reason that is leading our parliamentarians not to accept women as equals and as leaders. Yes, as I've said, patriarchy is still playing a very major role in this, and mindset of some of our men, and then fear. Men are quite comfortable with their mothers, because their mothers love them. They love their mothers, and their daughters, they just love them. But wife becomes a little difficult, especially when she wants to venture into politics. And women's leadership is still a very big problem for some of our men to accept. But I want to urge them to accept women as members of this society and as equal partners in our development. And you know, Kenya would do very well if they can come round to accepting women and respecting them as leaders. I still have no answers to why our men, even the very, very educated men, would not want to see this aspect of our lives, our well-being. And they know that women preserve life. And all of the men and women who are now leaders were born and brought up by women. They were mentored by mothers. And they love their mothers. What defeats me is why they would refuse to give women what has already been given by the highest law of the land, the new constitution. And now there is a crisis. I was hoping that some women organization would sue our parliament for refusing to honor the provision of the new constitution. And now it's messy. I don't know where we are going to go, especially if we should go for elections this year before this matter is solved. In August last year, we were supposed to have found a formula, but that did not even work either. It's a very big problem for this country.
Okay, now that you mentioned...
Fortunately for me, my husband was very supportive. I wish he was here. He's in Kisumu. He would have talked about this. But he was very supportive. I guess it was the way he was also brought up. He was very... Initially, the elders were a little hard. Because you know here we have very strong elderhood sort of programs. And when the elders decided to support me, they called my husband. And they told him that, you know, we have decided that your wife is going to be our representative in parliament. And now we want to declare that she will not be, that you can get married to another wife. I looked at this and I said, you come to my home to tell my husband to get married to another wife? They said, yes, because now you will not be available. You will not be here, you will not be available. And he can no longer, shout at you or of course he wasn't shouting. But then they told my husband they could help him get a wife, and that just killed me. And in my home, telling my husband if he wanted a wife, they'll help him to get one. But I had to be civil and nice to the elders. But what they were saying was this, that they had chosen me as a leader and not as a woman. They were not seeing me as a woman now. They were seeing me just as a leader. And they were telling him that as a leader, nobody can boss over this leader anymore. She's the leader, and you cannot shout at her or expect her to be there for you. She'll be there for the community and for the constituency, but she will not be there for you. And therefore, if you want a wife, we are prepared to help you get one. That was the hardest part of this thing. I thought, well, maybe I should not even try to lead these people, because these people are traditional, and this is a very traditional area. And they are telling my husband, and we are sitting there, and they're saying, we are prepared to help you get a wife, because now you will have no wife. And then one other rule they told me, you should always be home before your cows come back home. And I have no cows, and I'm saying, but it is in the evening when I meet the people, that I want to elect me. They're saying, no, you have to be here before the cows. And then they start bringing cows here. About 5 of them brought me cows, which was very nice and kind of them. But then eventually they told me, no, the issue is we don't want you to be out there in the dark because you can be hurt. They knew it was going to be very violent. But instead they're telling me about cows. You have to be here before the cows come back, and count them as they come into the homestead. But these are some of the issues that I had to deal with as a leader and a member of parliament for this area. And I had to accept and respect the elders, because they did a lot of work for me. Actually, they made it happen for me.
Maybe going back to the
we went to court
in Safari Park. How did they perform?
That issue went to court, and the court decided, because some women went and sued the women who had been picked by the women's organizations and said, no, these women are urban. They do not know the issues that concern women most. And they wanted Maendeleo Ya Wanawake to be the only nominating body to bring women to the commission. And the women said no. The women that had been picked by the women's movement was perhaps the best, because we all came from all over. And when they raised this issue and took it to court, at one of the KANU meetings, I was telling Secretary General of KANU, who came from Murang'a, that I am representing Karachuonyo, which is very far from any city. But Murang'a is very close to Nairobi. So who is more qualified to represent who? But they did not want to see that argument. The argument was that we were too urban to represent women. But they were just afraid of strong women. Like Wanjigo Kabira, powerful but very quiet. You can't even tell that she's that powerful. And Nancy Baraza and, Abida Ali, all these women, very well qualified, very experienced, picked up by women themselves. And then the women took us to court. But then Zipporah Kitonyi, who was chair of Maendeleo Ya Wanawake, said, no, you can't take these women to court because already they've been picked up by fellow women. Again, it was fear of the well-rounded woman, well-informed, well-educated, with experience, coming to sort of disturb the patriarchal arrangements in our communities. Yeah, I think that was the problem. Okay. But eventually we won. And the women from the districts were fantastic. We did the elections ourselves. There were some, of course, who were not very well versed with what was going on, but the bulk of the women who came from the districts to Bomas of Kenya to draft the new constitution were very well informed women. They were very well prepared by the women's movement before they came.
Tell us a little bit about the Surumeti Committee, because there's been argument that the Bishop Surumeti Committee, that it was the beginning of affirmative action for women in the Constitution.
No, affirmative action had been there before Surumeti Committee, but the Surumeti Committee was one of the best. In fact, if we had adopted the Surumeti Committee, we would have gone very far, because it covered almost all of the needs of women to be where we wanted them to be in the government and also in the legislature. And had it been accepted and put in place, it would have given women even more than what the draft actually eventually gave them. It was one of the best. And although it was religious based, it did not look at the women's position in the churches itself. Yeah, because they are, of course, the Catholic will not have women bishops or anything like that. And even the Anglican, although now they have women, they usually drag their feet. In my own church, has not truly engaged women in church leadership. But Sulumeti Committee was a very good one. It was very, they looked further than what was here now, and they embraced ideas from all corners of Kenya and put it down for consideration for the new constitution.
Okay, and now that you took...
If you look at all these other provisions, every provision includes men and women. In marriage, for example, in matters of wealth, inheritance. For the first time now, girls can inherit land from their fathers and also from their husbands where they're married. Before this, they could not. So today, there are much bigger gains than this particular one that is still bothering us. They're not in leadership position. In all other areas, women have been catered for, women and children, and even the disabled. Yeah, catered for very well in the new constitution. It's taken too long. I mean, we started agitating for positioning of women actively before independence. 1954, I was fully engaged in really trying to get the women's voices to be heard. And we were hoping that by the time we got our independence, all our problems would be solved, that women would share equally with men in all endeavors and spheres of development. But it has not happened. So it's been a very long time. It's a very worrying trend now. I only wish some of our leaders will throw their minds back and see where we're coming from and the struggles that we have undergone to get where we have reached. That way they might just accept women and accommodate and embrace work with them. Because women mean no harm to anybody. They are human beings like everybody else. And God has given them some virtues that some of the men don't have. And refusing to accept women as leaders and refusing to sit on the table with them to discuss the needs of our nation, the future of our nation, is a killer to both men and women, because they are refusing to listen to the voice of reason, the voice of wisdom that both men and women have. And like Nyerere said once when he met with us in Arusha, he said, men cannot continue to walk on one leg. They must bring in the woman so that they can walk together on both legs. That is the truth. Men in Kenya want to walk on one leg. It is not going to work. It is going to take us much longer to achieve what we must achieve for our country if they would accept to just merge and work together with women as human beings. Women have as much to offer as men in our country. And men those few men who are adamant, who are sticking to even the old culture gave women positions in their communities. What is happening now is not even African. It is not even traditional. It's something that is very new, and it is something that perhaps we need to inquire even more and find out why some of our people are being so obstinate and so very hard on accommodation of women.
We'll be now moving forward.
There are empowering. We have many organizations that are now empowering women, especially politically, preparing them for the next elections, which is a very good thing. But that is not enough. That is very short term. I think we need to sit together, men and women, and chart a way forward, especially in the area of political participation of women, to sensitize Kenyans about the value of listening to both voices. Once we have a group of men and women who can do this, who can decide that yes, we need to bring women to the table, then even our politics will not be this hard and this hostile. You have seen people even kill each other or fight. The women that I've known in my time as a politician will always tell you that it does not matter what tribe, Mama. The killing, the shedding of blood, the violence that we see is not right. I have not heard this come from many men. A few of them have said so. But almost all women across the board have said, no, we don't want violence in this country. So that voice of reason, you cannot shut it aside and pretend that doesn't exist. How we go about bringing men and women to accept each other and to work as a community of leaders is what is still worrying most of our people, especially those people who mean well. I know we are torn as a country now. We are so polarized. We are not a nation that I knew when we became independent. Now we suspect each other on tribal grounds. We don't even accept other tribes when we discuss certain issues. We would rather see some of these issues from the lenses of the tribal basis of some of our very brilliant people, very brilliant leaders. And this is not going to get us very far. I really want to implore our leaders to start thinking about nationhood, especially in politics. And I'm hoping that after these elections, whoever wins will want to have a Kenyan nation seen in all the departments, the ministries, the parastatals, whatever else in this country, because you cannot continue to leave half of Kenya out of governance. It is not right. It's evil. It's not good. Let's face it. We are Kenyan. We are not Kikuyu or Luo or Luhya or Pokot or Pokomo or what have you. We are still Kenyans, and we want to depict that picture to the world. That's the only time that they respect us as a people. And you cannot do it without having women sitting on the table and discussing some of these very fundamental issues. You cannot do it. You're only hurting yourself and hurting the country by refusing to accept women and by refusing to accept other tribes. So that too, for women it's double-edged, because one, you are a woman and your own tribe's woman. And then for men, of course, you are the man. And also you belong to a tribe. It's a tragedy. It's a tragedy for this country. I do not know where Kenya will be another 50 years from now if we go the way we are going. Something has to happen now for Kenyans to start shaking hands. And you cannot shake a clean... Yeah, you can't. We have to open up our hands, which mean our hearts, to accommodate, to accept, and to live and let live as a nation. That is the cry of many of our people. And hopefully, politics will not continue dividing us the way it is dividing us now. And it's hurting women more than the men.
In fact, there's been that...
Look at the American system. The women will stick with the Republicans and what have you. And South Africa is the same. Uganda is even worse when it comes to that. You are either with Museveni or you are not. And it doesn't augur well for us. I believe in my heart of hearts that man will come to realize very soon that it does not work. It does not work to look at me through the lenses of my tribal base. It does not work for anybody to look at me through the lens of being a woman. We only suffer. We don't move. We don't develop on those bases. And I don't have adequate word to say it, but truly, I know in the heart of everybody, including our leaders now, they're yearning for a time when Kenya can come back together again as a nation. I'm sure everybody wants to see that happen. They don't know how to start. But when you hear some of our people say the things that they say, and suggesting some of what they would like to see done to certain tribes and groups and women, then you wonder whether truly they ought to be called leaders. Why would they want to be leaders if that is where they're coming from? If they must be their own tribes people, or must advocate for only their tribes and no other tribe, or advocate for men and not women and men. It's a universal thing, but Kenya has suffered more than any other country, even in this sub-region, in terms of the base of our political well-being, that you have to be your tribe before you become Kenyan. It is not going to work for this country. And if anything, it's only going to get worse. So I am hoping that the leaders that we pick up this time will want to shed off this tribal tag and embrace Kenyan people as equal, Kenyans, and work together with them. Give them employment in government, in parastatals. Your name should not, like now I know, you mentioned the word, there's a Kisii guy who is called Onyango. And Onyango is a very typical Luo name. So the guy has really suffered because I was telling him, you should drop the name Onyango and have a real Kisii name for you to survive, because that Onyango tag is not going to get you anywhere. It's a very big problem.
In fact, there has been also even political caucus through the development of the first women's political manifesto, Women Empowerment Link, also trained with the Grace Bogworth. She mobilized women. We developed the women's political manifesto, the second
I remember
one.
that.
And both of them have not worked. So how do we move forward as women to be able to consolidate that voice of women?
It is the women who will do it, not just for women, but for men also and for the nation, because the concerns of women are similar. You don't have to be a Kikuyu to give birth differently. So it will take the women of Kenya to bring back hope. And the sooner they go back to the drawing board, the better it will be for this country. Because you see, women's concerns go beyond tribe. And if they were get together again like we've done before, the men will come along and work with women. Because now we have tools that can be used to investigate and to come up with new ideas that will be acceptable to all tribes and to both men and women. Only women, I believe, can do this to this country. By coming back together again, going back from where we left, and setting aside whatever differences that we might have for now, but looking at Kenya as a nation and taking the very hard decisions that then they can sell or bring the men to accept. And men are not difficult once you can convince them. We've convinced them before in the past. I know now, because of the tearing of each other apart, women have also been torn apart. They are tribes women before they are women. And that is making things very difficult for them. And that perhaps is the reason why even the movement is not cohesive, is not working together now to undo the terrible things that are being done now and to strategize for the future. But I would really implore women to come back again and show Kenya a way forward, because they can do it. They've done it before, they can do it again. And this time around, they need not fail, because we've seen all the tearing apart of our people can do, the harm that it can do to us. So I would urge the women to come back again and start working from where they left. And they will have answers. They will have answers for this country. And now we have some very well educated women whose vision and conviction can take this country very far. They know how they feel, what visions they have, what convictions for a way forward for this country. Very good. Because then you can tilt the equation through your vote in Parliament and the Senate. So women need to be there in numbers. And it is not just the women. You look at some of the men. They were elected 4 years ago. They've not even opened their mouth to say anything. So why, be so hard on the women? I mean, we have men who are not doing very well in both houses. And of course, yes, there are also women who are not doing very well. But this is human nature. Let's not be too hard on women. Let's give them the numbers. It will help us to get the voting patterns right. And we'll get a lot more out of those women in both chambers of the two houses. Yeah, we give women a chance to be there. I know women are being accused, especially those who are representing the counties. They are not doing anything. They are not really helping us. Even women themselves are saying this. But they are doing some very good work. We might not see it now, but in another 5 years, we will see the results of the effort they're making now in their counties and also their constituencies. No, I don't agree. We must have women in numbers in our legislation.
Mama, what would you also say in terms of...
Saddest thing that has happened to us all, not just to women. There should have been continued civic education after the promulgation of the new constitution, so that people in the villages would get to know the provisions, what the constitution has for them, for their children, for the for the activities in the farms, and for everything that happens in their lives. People don't know what the provisions of this new constitution is, and yet the few of us who know are quite contempt. It's not true. It's not right. Let's find a way of giving civic education to Kenyan people, both men and women, so that they know about the new constitution, so that they know their rights in that constitution, and so that they can articulate some of these issues. But if they do not know, if no civic education is carried out, ever since the year 2010, nobody has come out here to teach people in the villages about the new constitution. They will not be able to even reflect on what they do not know about, even think about it. Yes, some areas have done very well where civic education has been carried on by maybe churches and other civil society groups, but there should have been concerted effort by the government itself, as well as the UN and women's organizations and men's organizations also, to go out into the field and teach the people, give them civic education about the provisions of the new constitution. Maybe we would be talking differently if even members of our parliament had been given education about the new constitution. But there's no deliberate effort to do so, and that's where the country has missed out a lot. I realize it's not very easy to write a book, but I've come a long way. I'm doing the final. I'm going through and seeing where I need to change and so on, and then very soon I will have it published. As I told you, my daughter read this draft and was telling me, you know, Mama, Dr. Wanjiku Kabira has been mentioned here 27 times. But because she's the closest, and because she's really worked for women in this country, and especially at the University of Nairobi, and some of the ideas that she has come up with. So in doing this book, I'm also lauding the work of other women. I've mentioned Wangari Maathai a lot because she and I worked during when she launched the Green Belt movement. I was her coordinator for South Nyanza in those days, and I know that had she lived until now, perhaps she would have made a very big difference in her own area of interest, the environment. I've mentioned other women leaders like Grace Onyango, Grace Ogot, Edda Gachukia, because I'm telling my story, but I also want to tell the story of other women, without whom perhaps I wouldn't have done as well as I did if I did, and without whom this country would have not seen the collectiveness of women's concerns and contribution to our country.
So
I know
it now.
No, it's done. It's almost done. I'm just waiting for Wanjiku to write a forward for me, and a few other, and then I will. I want Wanjiku to read it now before when I finish, to make her comments.
No greater calling.
No greater calling.
Yes, it's not greater calling.
Yeah,
No greater calling. That's the title. Thank you. Yeah.
Wow.
But I'm so happy you people came. I do not know whether I have given you what you wanted.
Sure.
But out of our discussion, perhaps you can pick one or two.
We have picked a lot.
We started even picking before before the days
we started informally.
Yeah.
Oh,
yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think Kenya is a great country. We just need to get our act together and do the right thing for the people, for the future. It's very disappointing right now, but I believe things will begin to change slowly. But you know, Uhuru Kenyatta is really tried as a person. I think let's give him credit, because he stood by women. Yeah, that's the truth. I think there was a time he really wanted to, but he got Duale. I don't believe those were Duale's words, the Duale 1 and 2. Yeah, I think it must have come from it must have come from Uhuru himself. Because Duale really championed for women, you saw that.
He did in Parliament.
In Parliament, and people are looking at the Chepkonga bill and the Duale
bill.
And the Duale one was more much.
Yeah, the Chepkonga one wasn't going to work because it was going to take a long time. There was no time frame or anything. But the Duale one was specific, except now, of course, does not work. But they've tried. They need to do a little more, a lot more than they've done.
This is off the cuff,
to work with women. But there are these fears that make them not fully accept and bring in women to work together. That thing that you saw in Parliament, I was there. They started working out one by, and they knew that the numbers were going to be there, were not going to be there for them to pass this motion. It was deliberate.
It was deliberate.
It was deliberate.
Even bringing that motion, in fact, that's what I was saying. It was deliberate. They just wanted to cheat women. But within them, they knew they were not committed.
Yeah, there was no commitment.
There was no commitment.
But when you talk to them individually out here, oh, they are very committed, Mama, we are doing everything we can. You know, yes. And inside there, it's really different. Yes. It's a boys' club.
Yeah, because the numbers, as she's saying, the numbers are
they
there.
have the numbers.
They have the numbers.
From the both sides of the house.
Parties come together, always.
Yes.
When such issues have come up, both Jubilee and ODM will come together. Yeah.
If there is commitment, they do.
It's
tell this generation that they need to work on the gains that you people have put forward.
And also before we.
Ever since I retired, I knew I don't stand. I retired and supported young.
You mentor?
Yeah. Even now, I still mentor young women whenever I'm called upon. Okay. And I know many women do. They will go out there and talk to young women. I do it deliberately. Like, I go to schools. This last Saturday, I was in a school and really talked with the girls. And they have so many questions that I wonder if I had not gone and talked to these girls and listened to some of their concerns, and answer some of their questions, where would they be? What would they be thinking? How would they start thinking to be in this profession, especially in political area, if I had not gone there to talk with? I think we need to mentor young people, both boys and girls, all of us. And then we need to document. That's why I want to write, because our experiences should be shared by the future generations so that they know where we are coming from, the struggle, the challenges that we faced, and how far we have come. Then they'll know to pick up from where we have left. I believe those who have been in leadership must document something. Kenyans are not writing as much as they did in the past. Before, Kenyans used to do a lot of writing, and now not so many of them have the time. But those who have been in leadership must write. They must tell us their story. We must learn from their experiences and the challenges they faced, so that the young people can pick up from where they've left. But women must work together with men to achieve some of these goals that we are not achieving. Now the world is talking of 50 planets by the year 2030. Is Kenya going to be there by the year 2030? Will that 50-50 planet be there for the women of Kenya also? Will they partake? Will they be part and parcel of that 50-50 planet if we go the way we are going? And the year 2030 is not a long time. That's how many? About 15 years from now. So we need to start preparing for that planet, 50-50 planet. And that means that both men and women must sit now and talk seriously and strategize as we move toward the year 2030 for that 50-50 planet. Because we cannot be left out of that planet.
I think it's when you left. You left the machine and you went.
Yes, but of course during the Kenya time, many of my supporters were arrested. I was also arrested, and was taken in, and they were asking me questions that I didn't even know about Kenya. So when they were posing all these questions and telling me, yes, you've been a part of it, you tell us you've been, I just kept quiet because I didn't know anything about Kenya. But they kept me throughout. First of all, they came for me about 3 in the morning, and they took me in. And I did not leave that building until about 6 in the evening. I think they were ashamed to let me go in the glare, that everybody would see me. And it was very, very hard for me, because some of the accusations they leveled at me I had not even heard of. I didn't even know about Kenya, but they insisted I was a Kenya agent here, in Newland, and they were very hard on me. Sometimes you don't even want to go there because it makes you feel very sad, especially when you are accused of things that you do not know anything about, that you have not even done. And it can make you feel very bitter, very, very bitter. I look at Koigi Wamwere. I knew Koigi because he was in the house with me. That guy meant very well for this country. Yet, he really suffered for this country. And many other people. The Seven Sisters, for example, in those days. Those were men who had a vision for this country, who wanted the very best for this country. But look at the way they were harassed and treated. Slapped left, right, and center, sent into all those dungeons and the rest of it. It does not make Kenya a safer and better place. Because you come out of... I was very bitter. Fortunately, as a Christian, I prayed over it, and I got over it. But it leaves a mark. Yes, it leaves a mark in your heart, and it remains there with you for always.